As you can see, right next to me is the mayor of Miami-Dade County. I'm thrilled to have Daniella Levine Cava here with us today. And we're going to talk about real estate in a very different way than I usually do on this show. I will remind people, we do have an open chat available. So if you have questions, we'd love to get some of your questions answered live with the mayor of the county. Daniella, how are you?
Doing great. So good to be with you, Hal.
Good. As you were walking in, you mentioned something. You now have gotten your second.
Double dose Daniella, that's me.
All right. And we do, I love it. And you do have some water there. So obviously feel free, because I know that the second shot and even the first shot can have some effects temporarily. So hopefully they're light, if not non-existent for you.
Thank you.
All right, good. So I sit every week and talk to somebody different in the industry, and we understand what real estate is and how it kind of ticks and operates. But you have a very different role from a much higher viewpoint. And what I'd like to understand is, how do you feel about the surging real estate market, not only in Miami-Dade County, but across the country? It's really unprecedented.
Yes, I think it's really fascinating. We are definitely seeing different ideas about living in so many ways. Our lives have been upended by this pandemic, and people are wanting to live a better lifestyle. People want to live in open spaces. They want to live where they can enjoy themselves. Certainly, we're enjoying a boom of businesses relocating to South Florida, as well as individuals, whether it's a second home or a first home. So it's really good. We're happy. We're welcoming everybody. Other people's misfortune is our fortune.
I absolutely believe in that. And what's really strange is nobody could have predicted this. At least I certainly did not, right?
No, absolutely. Well, I wasn't planning for a pandemic. Were you?
No, but I'm saying within the pandemic, and certainly the first couple of months were downright scary.
Yes.
Where do I get my next roll of toilet paper?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a tomorrow? Because it really felt like the sky was falling.
Indeed.
And out of that came, after several months, an incredible real estate market, mostly driven by incredibly low interest rates. And even afterwards, as you started to mention, our lifestyle's changing. People are not necessarily going to go back to the office. People definitely want to have a home that is in a different style than what they felt they wanted before the pandemic. So why don't we expand on that? What do you believe is the general idea of what people want these days with both work environment and home environment?
I know that for some, it was moving to a place where you didn't have to be in such close proximity. Certainly, we heard that from some of the New Yorkers and other urban dwellers. They wanted to be in the fresh air that they know was safer. And people were discovering the outdoors. People, after all, you couldn't even buy a bicycle there for a while. The backlog, the demand was so great.
True.
And there was just a big clamor to open the parks. I know as county commissioner, I really pushed then Mayor Jimenez to open the parks quicker because they were worried at the time about making sure people behaved appropriately in the parks and that everyone was safe. But where could you be safer than outdoors in a park? And not everybody lived in a neighborhood where they could recreate just around their house. So parks are very important. But so people wanted to be living maybe in a more suburban or more rural. I understand that in the Midwest, there's even a move to more rural areas. So here it's more the suburban push, but other places more rural. And of course, the being able to work virtually opens up so many possibilities. So a friend who had been living in New York City, working at a hospital there, and she was working remotely. And then she said, well, I'm working remotely. I might as well
do it from somewhere I like.
Somewhere I like with a beautiful view.
And she went and did it.
She went and did it.
Okay. Wow. So with so much change happening in the philosophy of how people approach both work and housing, should government play a role in the real estate market directly? I know that things that your office does and things that you have in your mind certainly affect real estate, but should government dig in and kind of do other things that you believe will be good for the real estate market here locally?
Well, I think government should always be involved in looking at trends and trying to anticipate how to support the workplace and the economy. In this case, we are potentially creating more hardships for people who can't afford to live here already. So the increase in property values disadvantages many who live here and are struggling to find a decent place to live. So I think it is important for government to think about how to mitigate that. So it's good for individual realtors and property owners, but it might not be so good for people who are working and not able to afford those prices. Another piece of it is, well, what if there's popular housing? Maybe other properties are less popular. Maybe some of the commercial real estate could be repurposed. Because, as you say, people are not necessarily going back to the office, although, remains to be seen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
definitely there's a clamor to be around people in the workplace. People like having colleagues around them. And so for those that have a choice, there may be some more of a hybrid model. But perhaps there's property that could be repurposed, for example, for housing. So I'm very interested to explore that. And I know some places have purchased hotels that were not utilized when tourism was down and converted it as well to housing. So those are some of the things to
interesting. I hadn't
explore.
heard that. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Mhm.
So we really have a new dichotomy in some people that are benefiting wildly from the real estate boom that we're having now.
Yeah.
And then people that are going to struggle, people that had been renting that always had the desire to purchase. All of a sudden, one of the check boxes got lit up, which is low interest rates.
Mhm.
But then the prices kind of took off as well, which mitigated a lot of the benefit of
Mhm.
having these low interest rates. And we still haven't seen where this market goes.
Mhm. And let's not forget all the people who lost jobs or reduced jobs or businesses, and they could not afford to pay either their mortgage or their rent. So we have a huge backlog of foreclosures and evictions. That is another really big crisis in the making. We've been able to work with the folks who were evicted through the courts, but the writs of possession were not enforced because of the housing moratorium. Thousands of them are eligible for financial assistance through the federal government, and that money goes directly to the landlords. So we're making many landlords whole, paying them back rent all the way till March of
Wow.
2020. So that is, I think, a real benefit. But that was about 2,000 cases that were in that posture, and now it's estimated another 6,000 or 7,000 are making their ways through the court.
So when you have a massive amount of individual cases to look at, do you apply a blanket approach to it? I mean, I know that it really comes down to there's a lot of mechanics that have to be done at the government level,
Yeah.
but it's driven by what you want to see as an overall end goal, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
how do you do
I'm
that?
very proud, actually, of what we've done here in Miami-Dade County, and it's not been without controversy. The moratorium did exist. Of course, even the governor had a moratorium for a time, but Mayor Jimenez, as sheriff, and now as sheriff, we've not enforced the writs of possession during this pandemic. And now we've started to enforce those that were not directly the result of COVID. So we're screening the cases. We're doing it through our Office of Public Housing and Community Development. And we have actually community members, housing advocates, landlords who've been part of a screening process and who have given us guidance. So we also have our homeless trust working with us. So if somebody is displaced, they're supported through the Homeless Trust to be relocated. So we're doing everything in our power to make sure that people are safe. Remember, the original idea about the moratorium was to not put people out on the street when they are safer from this pandemic at home.
Got it. And you mentioned something along the way of explaining that. You said as sheriff.
Oh yes, I'm the sheriff. Didn't you know?
I did not. I better watch myself.
Yes.
What does that mean, and how did that affect your ability to do what you just did?
So in law enforcement, most counties, the exception are 2, have a designated sheriff that's separately elected. And a year ago, the public voted to create a separate elected sheriff position both in Miami-Dade County and Alachua County, I believe it is. And so there will be an election in 2024 for a sheriff. But in the meantime, our system in Miami-Dade makes me the sheriff. And the sheriff role, apart from having the police department report to me, is the court legal services. So we have a court services office that is responsible for effectuating orders of the court. And as sheriff, I have direct responsibility for how that office functions. So when the CDC, the national CDC, created a moratorium on evictions, I was able to Mayor Jimenez was able, and then I continued to effectuate that moratorium by not executing on those writs of possession. And there's been a lot of confusion about this because, for one thing, if you're a squatter, meaning you never had a right to be in that dwelling, you're not entitled to that protection. This is only for people that were legitimately renting.
Right. And couldn't pay rent during the period of time that they were underemployed or lost employment or had hardship.
That's right. And that's what the CDC order is about. It's about those people who are negatively affected by COVID. And the good news, like I say, is that we do have federal funding. It's called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP. We had a first tranche in the fall, and then starting March, we had another $60 million. Also, the city of Hialeah and the city of Miami also have their own allocations, and they also are assisting people.
Wow. That's tremendous. And it's great to see that there's humanity within the government and what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And just to be very clear, because of course landlords are suffering, they can't pay their bills, they can't pay their taxes, their mortgage, and so on. The money goes directly to the landlord. And if the case of failure to pay is not related to the pandemic, then the person is not entitled to the protection.
Makes sense. We talked about how a lot of people are coming down from other areas of the country to enjoy our sun and openness and relatively expansive suburban areas here in Dade County, right?
Yeah, and actually, let me emphasize something. People are coming here because actually there are a lot of things you can do here, because we are outdoors so much of the year, and especially these wonderful fall, winter, spring months. People are flocking here not only for the beautiful weather, but because they can actually do things. Restaurants are open.
Agreed.
Venues, and not so in so many other places.
Got it. So with that, we are going to see traffic, right? And we already know this is an issue. We're not going to get into the deep levels of this, but is the county thinking about how to continue to look at this in a very active way so that we can control as best we can what today looks like and really what 6 months or 2 years or 5 years looks like in the way of people getting around and doing what they need to do.
Right. So we did enjoy a relatively traffic-free period, right? It was very
let me tell you, I saved a ton of time when I needed to go show houses and I was allowed to. It was quite nice to drive US 1. I can't say it's wonderful now, but
and it has crept back up. And as Mayor Jimenez, he's coming up a lot of this conversation, but as he used to say, traffic is a good thing. It means that
people are doing things.
People are doing things and business is on. But we see that traffic is obviously back, not to the same extent yet as before. So we have to solve traffic with good quality public transportation. So we do have a very aggressive plan. It's called the SMART plan. It has 6+ corridors, and those corridors are moving forward. We have, fortunately, dollars from the federal government, now the American Rescue Plan that can support some infrastructure. We're going to have an infrastructure bill, knock on wood, that's coming along. So we're really hopeful that we'll be able to move quickly on those corridors.
So the corridor that I live in and that this establishment's newspapers mostly serve is the one that runs US 1 at the bottom of the Palmetto.
Correct.
And people need to get into downtown. They need to get into Coral Gables. And the transit way, as it is now called, not the busway.
Correct.
Still appears like there's lots of things that can be done. And I know that there's something coming up pretty imminently. If you could just explain to people how that's going to run and how that might affect real estate values and the desire to be in this corridor.
Right. So Well, there's the bus versus the train, and we lived through that controversy for many years. I did support the extension of Metro Rail and was very disappointed that that was not approved. The reasons were many, mostly having to do with the financing, because you have to have density to get federal dollars for rapid transit. But we did qualify and receive dollars for a bus rapid transit system. Really, bus rapid transit is kind of a bus that's like a train. So in this case, it's on a dedicated roadway that has traffic light prioritization, so signal priority. It also has stations in the new world that will be climatized, so they'll be more comfortable. There'll be local and express type services, and level boarding, so that saves time, reduces the time at the stops, prepaid fares. And so it's anticipated that this will be a superior service. It will be a choice ride, meaning that people who have their cars will choose to move to transit because it will be superior. It will be faster, it'll be comfortable, it'll be reliable. So that's the plan, and we are breaking ground in the next month or so.
When is it expected that the first phase could really be seen by the public? And then also, with all the things that you're saying are going to be benefits, how does that break down the stigma of riding a bus?
Yeah, so it's supposed to take a couple of years. I had hoped that we'd have broken ground a couple of months ago, but we're not that far behind schedule. We're moving ahead. And why would people choose to ride this bus? Well, it will be hopefully electric. It will be shining new. It will be streamlined service. Mostly people will ride a bus if it's reliable and comfortable, and this will be both of those things. And we're going to do a heck of a public relations campaign to make sure people know it's available. And look, there are a lot of people that depend on public transit right now, so obviously they're going to continue to depend upon it. And this will get them to work or to school or job, whatever they need to do more reliably. But I, for example, consider myself a choice rider because riding the Metro Rail from Dadeland downtown was a heck of a lot better than sitting in traffic.
I would agree with that. And if I had a dedicated place I needed to go on a regular basis, i.e. an office, I would absolutely choose that as well because I do not like sitting in traffic.
No.
However, for me, I've got to be in multiple places a day,
Yes.
and I never know what the next place is. So unfortunately, I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah, but remember too, we're adding a lot of these so-called last mile services. On demand, you can get your freebie or other little small vehicles. They're coming to your door sometimes, and people are utilizing them, getting around town and giving up their cars. I was on a Zoom call yesterday with people part of our Thrive 305 community engagement initiative. And I was amazed the number of people who are now dwellers in the downtown or one of the more congested areas who've given up their car. They are truly depending upon transit.
That's a great success story.
It is.
And if we can turn it around for more and more of the population to do that, then we start to solve that problem even without addressing the actual roadways.
That's right. And it is expected that where these stations are on the transitway will turn into denser hubs for housing and commercial. And so they also will be attractants for people who want to be transit dependent.
If you don't mind, I want to kind of explore real estate from a more personal level.
Okay.
So you live in one of the suburban areas of Miami-Dade County, correct?
I do, yes.
How long have you been in your household?
I've lived in Palmetto Bay since November of 2013.
Okay. And how is it to live in suburban Miami-Dade County? And do you have dreams of going somewhere else within Miami-Dade County? I'm just wondering, how a typical, and you're not typical, but we're using you as an example, a typical homeowner feels about their house, which obviously has grown in value since you moved into Palmetto Bay, in a time where you could be, quote unquote, getting a windfall because the prices are so frothy right now.
Well, in my case, my husband likes to have a yard.
Okay.
And he likes a garage where he can putter and build things. And so we have both of those amenities where we live. And we live on a very quiet street with a lot of foliage, and he's planted a lot of fruit trees, and I don't think we're going anywhere. It's paradise.
That's great.
Mhm.
But for somebody that is thinking about, geez, I was planning on moving before the pandemic, kids are out of the house, whatever the story is, there's a reason why people, they're not compelled to, but they feel like, what, now's the time for me to make a move. And the
Yes.
pandemic may have slowed
Yeah,
that down,
yeah,
but
yeah.
now there's like a fire accelerant on things.
Yes,
It's
yes.
like, wow, if I could sell where I am now, I could profit a lot more than I could have a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But at the same time, where do I go? Because
Well,
that's, first of all, the
that's a good
prices of
point.
those homes
Yes,
have
yes,
accelerated.
yeah.
And with low inventory, a lot
Mm.
of people that I'm dealing with are afraid, because if I get my house under contract and I'm going to have to move on, let's say May
Yes.
15th,
Yeah.
where do I go?
Well, you obviously are in the business, so you're talking to a lot more
Right.
people. But I have to say, in my little circle,
Right.
I know people who've sold just for the reasons that you said. The market is up, and they were not particularly planning to previously. Some of them are moving to more urban areas for the convenience. Some of them are leaving town. So that is very distressing to me.
Yeah,
So
we
while
want
we're
people
getting,
here.
yeah, I do. I want my friends and loved ones to stay right here, especially now that I'm working so hard to make sure that we have a bright future in Miami-Dade County. But that to be said, look, it's a time of transition for so many. We started the conversation that way. People who lived through this incredibly awful year and now are finding new values, new things that matter to them. And so it's a good time to reinvent.
Yes, it is. Well, let me drive back toward what the county is doing. We're coming out of COVID lockdowns.
Mhm.
We're obviously paying attention on a daily basis for new strains and what that could mean for us, and hospital utilization. All those things are looking okay right now, right?
Yes, they are.
What's the direction of the county? What do you think? I know that you might have to make micro adjustments, but what's the overall direction of the county at this point, in wake of the ending or the
Right.
paring down of the COVID crisis?
Yes. Well, I agree. I think we have turned the corner. I have definitely pivoted in my own thinking past just plain survival. And of course, I fought so hard to protect people and to get the vaccine into as many arms as possible. And again, today was my second dose. So I'm feeling particularly excited that I'll be able to visit my grandchildren in a couple of weeks. That
People say after they've gotten their
seen.
second dose and they've waited their 2 weeks, they feel invincible. They can
Yeah.
finally get back in and start to acclimate to what normal life
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, it's very uplifting, even though it's not totally secure. Obviously, there's still a lot of uncertainties, and we all need to use those precautions. And while 77% of people over 65, including myself, are now vaccinated, overall population, 1 million doses. So let's see, 1 million people in Miami-Dade County have received either their first or 2 doses, which is quite remarkable as of yesterday.
And it's amazing. That leads me right into my next question. As you do what you do, and by the way, you're past your 100th day in office, right? Do you know what day
yes,
you're at?
Well, I'm month 5.
Okay, month 5. So about at 150, right? Approximately.
Yeah.
Are you on track with what you felt you could do
Yeah.
with the pandemic and everything, and just generally what you wanted to accomplish in the first 150 days? Are you there?
Well, I do feel very excited about the first 5 months, and I think the 100-day mark was also a source of pride to many of us who worked so hard. And clearly, pandemic was number one, and fighting, as I said, for safety and for vaccine doses. But look, we have some serious issues here. We have the existential threat of climate change. We have the economy.
Do you really want to go there too? I'll go there. We've got enough to deal with, right?
I deal with it every single day. And I told
Okay.
everybody, look, we're focused in the short term on this pandemic, but these other issues do not go away. I had an hour-long forum with the Urban Land Institute a little earlier today, totally on climate and resilience and what we're doing. And we need to be the showcase for the nation, if not the world, on how to deal with the risks that we face. We're in conversations now with the Army Corps of Engineers about a major project to protect against flooding. We're talking, like, I'm looking at this beautiful background here.
That's funny. I was just going to point us back here. Let's take a look at this.
It's quite lovely,
Yes.
but it's all at risk. We have the most assets at risk of any major metropolitan area in the world. So we are going to have to do engineering to protect it. And we are well on our way. We have a resilience 305 plan. We're implementing solutions in some of the neighborhoods most at risk. The Army Corps Back Base Study, as it's called, has these various barriers contemplated, which have to be modified to be less about walls and more about natural barriers. But regardless, the maps are so different when you institute these engineering solutions as compared to just letting the water rise. So we have to do those things at the same time as we're reducing our carbon, having more energy efficient buildings. You might not know that buildings are the primary producer of carbon, not our vehicles. It's our buildings. So we have a major initiative called Building Efficiency 305 or BE 305, in which we have the larger buildings coming online to do assessments and then change how they air condition, how they heat, their water. All of those things can reduce carbon.
So LEED certification is forefront.
LEED is definitely part of it.
Okay.
We also have cool roofs. We have white roads. We have many things that we can do to deflect heat. We're going to have a major announcement coming up the end of the month about heat, so stay tuned.
No little hint?
No, sir.
Heat. Other than it's about heat.
It's about heat.
I thought I could break the story.
No, sir.
Okay.
But we do have Earth Day coming up on the 22nd, and we'll be rolling out our climate change strategy that day.
Got it. And so you were talking about engineering to keep flooding from being as severe as it certainly could be without any attention.
Exactly.
And the idea is to do this through natural means rather than walls, as you put it.
Well, I'm sure it'll be some combination in the end, but islands, barrier islands, mangroves, other things that are more natural to prevent the water from flowing fully into the land. We have to build also differently. We need to have porous ground cover, not where the water just flows and floods. We have to have it where it's absorbed maximally. We have to look at our stormwater system to make sure we're not polluting while the water is running off. You know, we have places now that stormwater won't drain because the level of water underneath is higher. So we have to do all kinds of things to filter and pump, and those things are underway and being explored.
Can I take a few extra minutes? Because normally we would pretty much finish the show right around now, but I'd love to take a few more minutes with you. Do you have the time?
Yes, I have to check the schedule, but I think we're good.
Okay. So the way I want to look at this is you sit down in your car and there's a dashboard of information in front of you. And every driver is a little bit different. Some people will pay attention to the oil because they've had something happen in the past where the oil, was a problem. When you sit down at your mayor dashboard every morning, what are the things that you're looking at statistically to know that the county and you are on the right track? What are you paying attention to as you're brushing your teeth virtually?
Well, it's a wonderful question, Hal. Certainly, as I say, we're still on how many are getting sick or being hospitalized, positivity rates, and that. How many are getting the vaccine, because those are things that are critical to moving on. How many units of housing that people can afford are we building? What are we doing to prepare for sea level rise with our building codes? What are we doing to mitigate, to reduce our carbon? How are we transferring to electrification of our fleet? How many jobs are we creating that serve the people that have been left behind in disinvested neighborhoods? So how are we making sure that as new businesses, first of all, we want new business to come, we're attracting businesses, so we keep track of that. We have CEOs that are attracting other CEOs. We call it the CEO Ambassador Program. But then we want to be sure that when these companies come, that they employ locally, that we have job training pipelines, that that we're lifting up our small businesses. I have an Office of Equity and Inclusion to make sure that we're doing things in a way that will be more equitable, that will create those opportunities. Safety. We're looking at neighborhood safety issues. I've got an Office of Neighborhood Safety I'm building out. And thanks to the FTX Arena coming to town, the new name of our downtown heat arena, they will be bringing $90 million that we'll be investing in reducing violence and poverty in our communities. Wow. So I'm designing a program with the commission. I'm calling it the Peace and Prosperity Initiative. How are we doing with that? How many shootings must we endure? How many young people must die? So these are the things I think about every day. And how many people...
That's on your dashboard every day. It's amazing amount
every day. Yeah. And how are people responding to government? Do people feel heard? Do they feel that they have information? Do they trust? Are they? Do they get a good response time? Do we give good customer service? I worry about these things each and every day.
Amazing. So, can you give us a couple of high-level goals that, within your first term, that you want to have accomplished, despite all the things that we're facing today with COVID and coming out of it? What goals can you tell the public about that's going to be good for them, good for you, and hopefully good for the real estate market long term?
So I would like more people to be employed in jobs that will allow them to live decent lives. So that means attracting jobs, creating jobs. Some of them are infrastructure jobs with the money coming from the federal government, with the streamlining of permitting and moving projects forward more quickly. Jobs that people can use to put the food on the table, pay the bills, take care of their families, and provide young people a sense of hope and a better future. I want to make sure that we have buildings that are more resilient and that we are doing everything in our power to reduce the impact of climate change and sea level rise. And I want people to trust their government. I want people to feel that their voices matter and that they are included.
All right. I finally looked up, because I was so entranced in what we were talking about. I finally looked up. There are a couple of comments and questions here.
Oh, goodness.
Earth Month, and we're cutting trees. What's your position? I'm not quite sure which trees they're speaking of, but let's talk about earth and trees and how you keep the right balance.
Yeah. Well, we don't have an adequate tree cover here for a place that should be fully tree lined. Unfortunately, we don't. And we do have very strong laws in place that protect our tree cover, but we need to be more aggressive and we need to plant more trees. And I'll be working on that as well.
All right. And this is rather localized. I think I know what they're talking about, but there's a planned Wawa gas station. And
Yes.
it's new business, obviously, coming into the area. And Wawa has, over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, really made its strong presence felt in South Florida.
Yeah. Well, it's the location of the Wawa that's the controversy. And this was a piece of property that happens to be across from an elementary school where my own son attended. So I'm very familiar. Unfortunately, that was something that was agreed to with the community organization that was entrusted, and they made a decision, and it's entirely out of the county's hands. So I know it's creating a lot of heartburn for many people that are sad to see that be what was supposed to be something more along the lines of housing that people could use. It's a decision that's been made over which we don't have any control.
Well, the rest of the comments that I'm seeing here are pretty much accolades. You're doing a great job. We appreciate what you're doing. And I will tell you the same thing. We've known each other for many years, certainly well before you took such a prominent, wonderful role. I'm thrilled that you have this role. And I feel proud to be in the county.
Oh, Hal, that's great. Thank you.
It's a time of us to come together and to have leadership that will take us into the future. And I appreciate the fact that you are the one that's helping us do that.
Thank you.
And to everybody else out there, I really want to applaud the fact that we got our county mayor to come in and see us. It's a wonderful opportunity. And I'm hoping at some point when your schedule allows, you'll be able to come back in and we can talk more specifically about real estate. But I think we had a great overview.
It's wonderful.
Thanks so much. Real estate dreams still come true. Until next week, this has been the Miami Hal Real Estate